From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. And we've returned, Matt.
Yes?
I can't be the only person who is having this weird vibe. I hated this weird vibe that I've been feeling all pandemic. Like, you go somewhere, you're at the grocery store, you have to go out, and then someone coughs,
Yeah.
and the energy in the room changes because the question, the big badger in the bag is this a common cold or is this COVID?
Hey guys, this is Luke here. I'm calling out of Georgia. I would definitely like for you guys to use this on air. I would love to know what you think about it. I know we've talked a lot, or you guys have talked a lot about COVID lately, and I know you guys have done a couple of episodes on it, and talked about, maybe it being a conspiracy. I also have a theory of my own. I believe that it is a conspiracy very much as well. And I believe that COVID is nothing more than the common flu, maybe just another strand of it. And the social media and the news, I believe, is just exploiting, all this information about it, as far as death toll and, hospitalizations and everything like this. So what I find really interesting is on really any local news, social media, I've not seen really anything about flu deaths this year and the death toll on the common flu. I find that very odd. I'd like to know what you guys maybe thought about this. If you don't mind, yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right, Luke from Georgia. It's nice to hear from a Georgia boy.
Agreed. Hey, man.
So this is a bit of a tough one, Luke, but I have to say something that personally has been on my mind, thinking about influenza and, the coronavirus, and just since the end of 2019, really what's been happening as far as the flu and deaths that are associated with it. Because, if you listen to the news, you look at the statistics, that a lot of people worldwide get very, very sick from common influenza, whatever is most common that season, and many die. And let's just talk about that. We're going to talk about a couple different things that we have found and also what we've been hearing. So the first thing I want to point to is the CDC and their numbers that they have on their website, cdc.gov, when it comes to influenza by season in the United States. It's not really an article. There's a page you can find. It's called Past Seasons Estimated Influenza Disease Burden. And on here, you will find a grid. It tells you the number of symptomatic illnesses, the number of medical visits, number of hospitalizations, and deaths associated with that year's flu season. It goes from 2010 to 2011, all the way down through the years to 2019 to 2020. Now, if you just look at the numbers and you scroll over to deaths, it shows that from 2010 to 2011, there were an estimated 37,000 deaths associated with influenza in the United States in that year. And it also shows you that there's a separate set of numbers just to the right of that shows 32,000 to 51,000. Now that means that this number 37,000 is actually just kind of an average within a range, essentially, of estimates to how many people likely died of influenza. And it shows you that throughout the years, it's generally staying, in the 30,000s 40,000. Sometimes it gets up to as much as 61,000. That was in the year 2017 to 2018. That's the estimated number of influenza deaths. But then in 2011 to 2012, it goes as low as 12,000 estimated deaths. So you're really looking at a wide range here of numbers that are estimated. And the important thing to note here, or the most important thing at least, is that these are estimations. And we know this because there's been a lot of reporting on this very question that you're asking. Like what's up with the influenza of 2020? Like who got the flu and how bad was it, and did anyone actually die from it? There's an article that was written in Scientific American. It's called "Comparing COVID-19 Deaths to Flu Deaths is Like Comparing Apples to Oranges." It's an opinion piece, granted. It was written by Jeremy Samuel Faust. It was on April 28th, 2020. So this is pretty early in, the quarantining and coronavirus epidemic, but it's somebody who early on was looking at this question. And one of the major things that Jeremy points out in this op-ed is that it's very difficult for doctors and experts with the CDC and other health experts who are looking at things like this to estimate the number of influenza deaths in any year. And that's because, just like with COVID-19, as we discussed in our previous episodes, it's tough to know whether someone has passed away due to influenza or due to COVID-19 and the coronavirus, or if it was something else completely unrelated. They just happen to have the virus. There are also a lot of deaths that go unreported, especially in elderly communities, where it's unknown if this is actually something that caused the death or it was some other unrelated thing. There are just a lot of questions there. And the biggest question for me is that I've been unable to find an exact answer to is why are influenza numbers, or why do they seem to be so low this year compared to other years when there are so many COVID-19 infections? And the best answer that I've gotten so far is that the measures that all of us have been taking to prevent the spread of coronavirus have also hugely decreased the number of influenza spreader events, essentially, or the number of transmissions from person to person. That makes sense to me, right? That probably makes sense to you, but that's the best answer that I've gotten thus far.
Yeah, there are a couple of other things we could add to this. First off, I love the point about estimates. Estimates always have a margin of error on some part. And then add to this, there is one phrase used, Matt, that I want to draw everyone's attention to, which is associated with.
Mm-hmm.
Associated with influenza, associated with COVID. So not everyone who dies of the flu necessarily dies of the actual infection of the flu, nor is this the actual infection of COVID that always kills people. There can be comorbid conditions, right? We know that, for instance, maybe obesity or existing pneumonia can play a huge role in these sorts of things. So what we're really saying here, Luke, is that at this point, yeah, I would agree with Matt that while the science shows us so far that these are distinct infections, they are related enough that some of the countermeasures people have taken against COVID also function as countermeasures against flu, right? You're reducing transmission risk through saliva or aerosol, and you're also not in close contact with a bunch of people, which is great for me, but I understand not everybody's bag of badgers. The thing though is we have to understand now, regardless what anybody's beliefs, opinions are, or even regardless what the latest research is, we're still laboring under a fog of uncertainty. There are people working around the clock to understand more of stuff like this. We looked into, you might find this interesting. We looked into this work of fiction a while back that was considered to be extraordinarily prescient. It was about a virus that started in China that was named something like COVID. And then we later found that that book had been revised and edited to be more relevant in the current day. That's another thing I would be aware of. The past can be changed, and changing the past is a little bit more difficult nowadays, but not as difficult as you think. We know that if you want to look further down the line, the dystopian timeline of these infections, then consider this. COVID-19 was not the first of its type. Okay, we're talking, like, if you like cars, folks, think about this. Anybody will obviously say that the newest Cadillac, the 2020 or 2021 Cadillac, is a world away from the first iteration of Cadillacs. The first Cadillacs are like more than a century old, at this point. They're very different, but they're still Cadillacs. So there are things like MERS that existed before that broke out. There are other things,
the original SARS.
The original SARS, right? Original recipe SARS, we can call it. And then the flu variants are like this as well. That's why Stephen King's post-apocalyptic novel, The Stand, is about a flu infection. Experts will tell you one of the most depressing similarities between COVID-19 and influenza is that they're punchy. You know what I mean? On a biological level, these guys are nimble. And they are quick to mutate. So we know that for multiple factors, we know that some other pandemic would be on the way. I've even read people saying this is some sort of training initiative to get people to normalize the idea of massive plagues. I don't think this is the case because these governments are terrible at cooperating with each other most of the time. But it is statistically inescapable that other things are coming. The thing that I wish more people were talking about is that what the next thing down the line, yeah, man, it might actually be a nasty, souped up version of influenza. And it might be something that just can't be medicated around. I think it's a fair question to ask how these things are related because they have similar symptoms, especially if you don't have the equipment, right, to do testing and stuff like that. But as far as, on the show, of course, we don't always agree with each other, but I think we're on the same page here. As far as we can see, and this is not based on just our own research, I've been reaching out to some folks, some audience members of the show who work in this field professionally. As far as I can see, all the evidence points to SARS-CoV being its own thing. And the reason that we haven't seen more reports of flu is to Matt's excellent point about the countermeasures that were deployed, especially during flu season. Those were still around. The second point I would note is the problem of finite resources for these institutions. I guarantee you, a lot of the people who were working on influenza-related things, they got what could be described as an oh shit email.
Yeah.
That meant they were now working on COVID.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
For sure. To speak directly to you, Luke, and anybody else out there who's feeling that same way, I would say that early on in this whole situation, I shared a lot of your skepticism and uncertainty and just questioning officially what's being told to me. It felt very weird. It still feels like a weird situation, right? This whole thing feels unreal, feels like a movie. What I would say is that I've had very, very close people in my world become infected with this thing, and I've seen the effects firsthand. And I think a lot of you listening right now have probably experienced, some close brushes with this thing, if not fought your own battle with it. You mentioned you're not seeing a lot of stuff in your local news. You know, we don't all have the same experience, right? But one of the big strengths of having a group like this, you know, where we can communicate with one another and get experiences and share them, is being able to see through other people's perspective, right? So I would just say reach out. Maybe just because you're not seeing it in your local area doesn't mean that it's, you know, not real or not what somebody says it is. It just means that it's not, you know, thankfully not affecting you or your local area. And that's really a blessing more than anything else. Because this thing has ravaged a lot of people. And I don't really know where I'm going here. Just, Luke, if you're still feeling like maybe it's not real, I don't know, just reach out to some people and here's where it gets crazy. Maybe that might be a good way, or just start a discussion and see what everybody else is saying.
And here's where it gets crazy is our Facebook page for anybody who wants to hop on and have these kind of discussions, again, with the best part of the show, which is you, specifically you. You know, I have to say, on a personal note, I think I speak for both of us here, we're continually surprised and in no small way grateful for the level of discussion that goes on. Like, people are hearing each other out and saying, well, I mean, what do you think about it? You know, and that kind of discussion, I guarantee you, is infinitely more valuable than people going in and trying to talk trash. Because I don't have any peer-reviewed studies for this yet. I'm sure one's out there, but I guarantee you, nobody is as funny on the internet as we like to think we are, me included. So honest discussion is probably for the best.